When it comes to Star Wars, any new content that gets released is always the subject of heated discussions. The Star Wars fanbase is incredibly passionate, and so with any new direction, it needs to be done with the utmost care and respect that Star Wars deserves. Even though in recent years the prequels have been shown more love, they do have many issues within them, and George Lucas did need to be reined in more when it came to those films. With the sequel films, we had two different creative minds having a bit of a tug of war after episode 8 being completely divisive and episode 9 just being JJ digging a deeper hole. And so getting to the Disney Plus shows, The Mandalorian season 1 was a success because it came after that complete disaster of the sequel trilogy. And so, people enjoyed it. It was much more Star Wars-y than what we saw before. We had Grogu, and the story was good. But even that's gone downhill with a truly forgettable and, dare I say, embarrassing season 3. We then had Ahsoka, which was a complete letdown, and now we have The Acolyte. At the time of recording, The Acolyte has just finished its 3rd episode, and if we look at Rotten Tomatoes, that audience score is pretty damning. And I have to agree with it, because after each of these 3 episodes, I've just felt like this.
Well, this sucks.
There are so many different time periods in Star Wars which I'd love to explore, and in this show, The Acolyte, we are actually moving away from the Skywalker saga and going 100 years prior to episode 1. So even though there was no reason to be optimistic about The Acolyte because of past failures from the other Disney Plus Star Wars shows, I was still a little bit more intrigued to see what this was all about, because it's not just another show which is based around the other ones we've seen, like in the Mandoverse. Like, it's not just a Bo-Katan series. The Acolyte is set during the High Republic era, and so you'd expect that maybe Disney and Star Wars would have something a bit more prepared when they're venturing into the wilderness of these different time periods, but instead they didn't. Instead they decided to risk this show with creators who are not experienced enough to be able to provide you any faith that this is going to be a success. If we look at Andor, for example, which unlike many of the other shows was well received, that had a creative team behind it that had the experience necessary. All you have to do is look at the IMDb pages of these people, like the showrunner Tony Gilroy. He's done so many different things in the past, like the Bourne trilogy, for example. Then we look at Dan Gilroy. He's done some big Hollywood movies like Nightcrawler. Then Beau Willimon, he did House of Cards, a very successful and well-rewarded TV show. And now if we look at the Acolyte showrunner Leslie Headland, her main credits include Netflix's Russian Doll and a series called Single Drunk Female. And if we just focus in on episode 3, which has received a lot of criticism for its script, I mean, it was bad. I feel bad for the child actors in that episode because some of the lines they had to say were really terrible. But if we look at the writers for this one, we have Jasmine Flournoy, who has this as her credits, and then Eileen Shim, who has this one as her credits. Now, she has worked on House of the Dragon, but she did only write 1 episode. So in terms of the writing ability of these two people, there's not a lot backing them up here. And if we go back to the showrunner Leslie Headland, what about this body of work here makes you think Star Wars? I tell you what, not a lot. And so what was the reason for this hiring? Why would Lucasfilm go for these people to helm this show? Well, they want to try and tap into a different audience for Star Wars. And you might be thinking, who is this audience? Because when Disney bought Lucasfilm back in 2012 for near enough $4 billion, you'd think that an IP worth that amount of money would cover all the different demographics. Star Wars fans as a collective have been brushed with many different terms in the past, because a minority would do something racist, for example, and so they'll just get that title of being racist fans, or the older fans of Star Wars are just not taking to this new generation, so they decide to be aggressive in this nature. And so what it seems like the approach has been from the president of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, is to rise up and target those smaller percentages of the fan base to try and eke out and push away the bigger percentages. But the thing is, these are the fans who have built up this brand, have built up Star Wars as a whole. They're the dedicated fans, they're the ones who will buy all the merch, and so if you're trying to push them away, that's the stupidest strategy ever.
You surprise me to how shit you are. Oh, thank you.
Another point to make for Lucasfilm as a whole really is that they like to ride the hype of people who've had recent successes. Like for example, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, they cast her in Solo, and they also cast her in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now that was because she was still riding the hype of Fleabag and that success. But was that the right person? Is this the wrong hype? Yes, because Fleabag has got nothing to do with Indiana Jones and nothing to do with Star Wars, but it's trying to get these people who liked Fleabag, who are a completely different sort of community. There will be some crossover, of course, but there's a lot of different sort of people there to try and get into these different franchises. So it's just trying to pull more people in through that way, through that source. And if we look at the Acolyte cast, many of the people here have just broken out into the industry. Like Amanda Stenberg, she did well in The Hate You Give and Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Daphne Keane, she obviously was a young child star in Logan, but also she's made a name for herself in His Dark Materials. And Lee Jung-jae was the head and lead actor in Squid Game. Now, Master Soul is one of the few positives of this show, and that's a credit to Lee Jung-jae. But the cast as a whole really do lack that chemistry between each other. Like, I know it's still early days, but even that initial chemistry is not there. It's like they've all just met for the first time. It's like being at school when you can't be in a group with your friends. Instead, you get picked random people. And as I said, many of these cast members have just broken out and are still finding their feet in the industry, other than, say, Carrie-Anne Moss, who's been around for some time. But when you have such a lack of experience in the cast, as well as the creative team, you don't have that balance there for a winning formula. I mean, the showrunner Leslie Headland, she's an out lesbian, we have a very diverse cast, and it feels like Disney have just decided to do this just to tick those diversity points and to pat themselves on the back for doing well. And I'm not against diversity in films and TV. What I'm against is when that's pushed to the front at the expense of the quality and success of the content, and eventually the success of the franchise that I love. In terms of The Acolyte and its story, I can't believe this is what they went for, because I just imagine them sitting around a table talking about it, saying like, we're going to do a new Star Wars show, we're going to have it set in a different time period, it's going to really freshen up the Star Wars universe, what should it all be about? And someone's like, twins? We're doing twins again? Oh, great, what a fantastic brainstorm this was.
It was the best of times, it was the blurst of times, you stupid monkey!
In episode 3, it was a flashback episode where they start to delve into the origin of the twins, where we see that this woman apparently put the twins into this woman in a very sneaky way. This is all taking place within this cult of witches, and we have seen witches in the Star Wars universe before, but we haven't seen chanting quite like this.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
Make it stop!
What I've always loved about Star Wars is seeing that good versus evil, the light side versus the dark side, the Jedi versus the Sith. But recently they're definitely trying to blur the lines more, make things more grey, and I'm just getting a bit sick of that with villains in general. Can we just have a badass villain who wants to be evil? Like, not everything has to be like that. Not everything has to be like a Thanos sort of character, where you can sort of understand their point of view. And this has been a bit of an issue for Disney as a whole, because, you know, in the past they had so many great classic villains, but now there's not so many because they're trying to go for this different approach. And the thing is now, if you had a character like Captain Hook come out, there'd be people saying, oh, you're being, you know, offensive to disabled people.
I had problems with that, and a lot of us on the production team had the problems with that, of associating disability with evil.
And we've seen this sort of thing with many different scenarios where someone will point something out and they'll take it all away and they'll add it to the other side, and they'll say, okay, now we're being equal, we're being inclusive. It's like, well, that's not how it works, because now you just balance the scales on the opposite direction. If you really want equality, you'll actually look for a way to balance it properly. I realise I haven't mentioned the Acolyte for a second, so here's a scene where we see Master Soul creeping around the woods and stalking some little girls.
I'm getting the word nonce.
For a show that's cost around $180 million, this is a piss poor attempt of a Star Wars show. It's a sci-fi show, a pretty poor one at that, in a Star Wars skin. There are still more episodes to go, so there could be some positives down the road, but from what I've seen so far, it's a poor script, it's an uninspiring story, it's a show that feels really cheap when you look at the price tag, and in terms of Star Wars as a whole, for a universe, something for me to enjoy, I'm really losing hope. This is another kick in the teeth in terms of my hope for the future of Star Wars. If you've been watching The Acolyte, what are your thoughts so far? Maybe you disagree with me and actually enjoy the show. Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like these videos, subscribe for more, and if you want to watch another one, on screen are a couple of my recent reviews.